My name is Chinouk Filique de Miranda and I am a student at the Fashion Master Strategy program of Artes. And we are here today with Timotheus Vermeulen as our keynote speaker, who used the metaphor of the Nike air pocket through hedonistic sustainability and sentimental abstraction. He is a scholar, a critic and an associate professor at the University of Oslo in Norway. Welcome.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that you are not really at home in the fashion field in your practice, but how do you feel that finding new luxury, or the term new luxury, consists with your research or the topics that you entail within your practice?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a very good question, and I'm not sure whether I've been able to answer this question successfully. But I do think that maybe there's two things. So I started, and it's also part of the title, with this notion of hedonistic sustainability, which comes from Bjarke Ingels, yeah, the lead architect of BIG, which is one of the most important architectural companies in the world today. Yeah. And he says that for him it's a reversal of an insustainable hedonism. And so he says, look, we're just doing all those things and it's insustainable. And so we need to change. And what people mostly want to do, he says, is that they say we need to change. We need to live less wildly, and we need to take better care of our environment as we live on. And he would like to change that. And so his proposition is that of a hedonistic sustainability, which basically says we should just do whatever we like, and we should make sure that the environment around us, the built environment, takes into account our wishes and somehow filters that, so that it balances out, right? Yeah. And so if a swimming pool needs heating and a supermarket needs cooling, yeah, they balance each other out. And so he says we should use one for the other. So he tries to create this kind of, it's an ideal, it's a projection. It's not a reality, but he tries to create a kind of balancing system. And I think it's an interesting premise, right? What do we want to sustain? Why are we so set on this hedonism? Yeah. So I think the new luxury in one sense presumes that there is a luxury that we apparently are willing to keep, that we're willing to fight for. Yeah. Which is interesting. I also don't know if this is the case. At the same time, if we have been living in a particular way for years, or maybe decades, or maybe even a century, it is very hard to imagine an alternative way of being, an alternative way of buying or of living your life. I don't know if that makes sense exactly, but that's as far as I've come.
No, it makes sense, but then on a personal level, what are you willing to sustain and what are you willing to change?
Oh dear.
Yeah, in your personal life or in your personal practice, or where does that come in?
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, that's the key question, and it's a really good question. But I don't know how to answer. Right? I mean, I try to buy eco-friendly clothing. Okay. So I guess I would be, I'm an example, as I imagine many of us are, of this new luxury. That in a way I think we look at what we like and then we try to see if it's sustainable, or if at least the advertisements tell us that it's sustainable. The extent to which something is really sustainable is abstract for us. And I think that's for me the key. And also I think that should be the key, right? I don't think as critics or as people writing or as people doing stuff, we're not outside of anything, right? We're not outside of a system. We're never outside of the reality that we live in. We're immersed in it. And so all we can do is try to, from our position within that, make sense of what's happening around us as it is shifting around, right? So I think we are inside whatever we talk about. Yeah. It's inevitable. Yeah. That doesn't mean necessarily that you can not be against it, but I do think that means you're complicit. You're always complicit. And so in terms of what I would say, I think I try to engage with the environment in a particular, but it's an abstract way. I don't know what nature feels like, right? This is the Nike Air pocket in a way. I think you have the Nike Air and then you simulate the environment. You simulate the environment often through data or through all kinds of really extended kind of schemes or algorithms. So the environment is a very abstract sort of sentiment in a way. Part of my metaphor of the shopping mall that I used, and part of the discourse of the 80s and the 90s, is this notion of simulation. And simulation basically says that we have a model, and the model plays itself out, right? Like a film script almost. And so if we talk about how we know that we're in love, or what you do on a first date, we know that through films and all kinds, and this has never been different. This is always how things work. You know stuff because you've read, and so you're in a way socially conditioned. And so your life is mapped out. But this also works on a grand scale. So what insurance companies do, for example, is that they calculate all the ways in which you can break your leg, right? This is how your insurance cost is being calculated.
Yeah.
If you're older, you pay more because they calculate, and so on and so forth. So what they do is, in a way that they map out like this, they simulate the future.
Yeah.
And so they preempt the future. This is this notion that the future, if it will happen, has already in a way happened in all those machines. In the same way that Shell, cynically has mapped out all the ways in which the oil price can change, right? And so they know how to act in a particular situation. And this is a preempting, an emptying out of the future. Okay. What fiction does, because it doesn't have to adhere to logical rules, because fiction can think the impossible, can think about dragons, or can think about ridiculous things, is that it opens up a future that isn't preempted, that isn't mapped out. And so I think fiction is there, and it's both the weakness and the strength. It seems to be, in a way, the only model left in order to think those futures that are not yet mapped out, is to think the impossible, is to think the ridiculous, and to start from there.
When you think about luxury, or searching for a new luxury, it's also a feeling luxurious, and it's a feeling that is sold, and
it's a performance.
Yeah, it's a performance, and when you fake the performance, what will be left?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think fiction is very tangible, right? Fiction is immensely. I mean, for example, when you go out at night, late at night, and you walk home, and there's a part which is dodgy or for some strange reason frightens you, and you have two ways that you can go home. One will take you 10 minutes longer, and the other one is very quick, but it's darker. Yeah. And you think, and that's a fiction, right? And the fiction really influences what you do, because if you feel, oh, maybe someone will rob me, then you will not, based on nothing, right? It's just because it's dark, you don't even know if there's dangerous people there, right? So fiction in a way is also a model, but it is a model that's based not necessarily on calculations that have to do with the presence. It's based on other stuff in a way. I think the Nike Air Pocket that I spoke about, that is the performance of the environment, right? But the performance of the environment as a feeling, indeed. I really agree with that. And so I think there's a cynical way to approach this, and a more optimistic way. The cynical is to say, yes, so fictions will preempt emotions in the same way that simulation might do it or something. But you'd hope that they also open up, right? And I think it depends on the types of fiction. I mean, Donald Trump is creating fictions all the time. They are not fictions that open up, they are fictions that close down emotions, that harden emotions, right? That will put people against each other, or that will put people against entire countries, or against the environment, right? So they're very distinct kinds of emotions. But I could imagine that there are fictions like the writing of Zadie Smith that is incredibly concerned with trying to open up empathy, right? So it tries to open up a sense of feeling with someone who may be opposed to what you feel, right? So I do think there's a real, they afford and limit both, right? I don't think there's a set emotion that comes or that doesn't come with fiction. It really depends on the type of fiction. If you watch horror, you respond differently than if you watch a comedy show.
True. You also talk about like empathy and postmodern sensitivity. Where would you see change compared to the way society views these like softer emotions now?
I can't give a good answer to that question. It's a very good question. I can't give you the appropriate, because I haven't thought about it enough. But what I can say, and I think you spoke about this in your paper, is, I mean, the postmodern should never be reduced to one particular mood or one particular strategy of interaction, but a very common strategy in postmodern advertising is the one of the spectacle, right? So you create the spectacle that entices people to buy something. It could be the spectacle of beauty, it could be the spectacle of shock, but it's right? Whereas, as you pointed out, so much today happens through mood advertising, right? So you create particular moods, and indeed, if you talk to trend watchers, right, or cool hunters, companies who sell trends, what they sell are moods. They never sell particular fabrics. So they say it will be this particular mood, the new romantic mood, or it will be the mood, the country mood, right? And so suddenly, a few years ago, everyone starts wearing those Clarks and Barber jackets, right? And so you sell a particular mood. And I've spoken about this elsewhere, but an emotion is short-lived, right? And so emotion is anger, for example. So if you say something really outrageous to me now, I might become angry and say, oh, you're crazy. And then you say, oh, I'm sorry. And then I say, okay, right? And so it disappears. But a mood is often not related to any particular thing, right? So you wake up, and I don't know, maybe someone wasn't friendly to you yesterday, you had something bad to eat, and so you just wake up and don't feel well. You're somehow stuck in a rut. And however nice you might be to me, if I'm in a foul mood, nothing can change that. So it's a very different way of approaching things. It's a more long-term, winding kind of thing that's far more difficult to pin down, which is its strength, I'm guessing.
The mall holds a significant place in consumer society. Have you did you think about that before you presented this here, or have you used the metaphor previously?
Yes.
Or,
so the metaphor I've been using now for 3 years. But it's not my metaphor, right? I mean, many people, when they speak about simulacra, when they speak about consumer society, or when they speak about late capital, they will use the mall as a metaphor. So I use it with that distinct idea in mind, that it has been a common way to talk about it, because it addresses the prevalence of capital, the prevalence of consumption, the prevalence of simulation, right, of being pre-planned, but also of the air conditioning. So it covers a lot of the bases that are often associated with the postmodern, as well as the lack of an alternative. And so everyone understands that we've been living in a particular kind of mall for various reasons. We want to get out, right?
But we can't get out.
And that's the question, right? That's the difficulty. I think that's the difficulty of the new luxury, and that's why it is interesting to me, and that's also the difficulty, I think, of so many artistic practices, and I would imagine practice in architecture and also in fashion. If you've been in one particular space for a very long time, and that space on all sides covers your horizon, tells you what the horizon is, how can you then find or create a new horizon? Right? If all you've ever seen is the color red, blue is not even a possibility. Right? You don't even know it exists. It's not even part of what you think the world can be like. Right? And so I think it's that idea that if you've always been doing red, how can you even think of blue? Right? And this is, I think, what perhaps fiction allows to an extent, I'm guessing, that I don't think the algorithm does, for example. So that's why I am, but you know, that comes with a danger. Right? Maybe blue is terrible.
True.